It's day 2 of the SCO Foreign Ministers meet in Goa. Today was the moving day. The speeches, the round table, the family photo, all of it happened today. We'll start with the arrival. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar welcomed his counterparts at the summit venue. All eyes were on his interaction with Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. He's the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. Full disclosure, I'm not a body language expert, but you don't have to be one to analyze these pictures. It was a cold and curt welcome by S. Jaishankar, just a namaste and a few photos. No smiles, no banter, and certainly not a handshake. India has made it clear that terror and talks cannot go hand in hand. So nothing surprising about these pictures. After the official welcome, the meeting began. S. Jaishankar, being the host, spoke first.
We firmly believe that there can be no justification for terrorism and it must be stopped in all its forms and manifestations, including cross-border terrorism.
He did not name any country there, but the reference is clear. Only one SCO member is actively pushing cross-border terrorism, and that is Pakistan. So Jaishankar urged all SCO members to freeze terror finances, to cut off the money. When Bhutto spoke, he took a jibe at India too. He said countries should not weaponize terrorism for diplomatic point scoring. A bit rich for Islamabad, we say. Forget weaponizing terrorism. This is a country that uses terrorism as legitimate foreign policy. But then again, what else can you expect from Pakistan? Coming back to India's statement, Minister Jaishankar's speech emphasized on 3 points. Number 1, counter-terrorism. We've already discussed about that in detail. Number 2, connectivity. Jaishankar said connectivity is key to progress. At the same time, he had a rider. Connectivity must not violate territorial integrity or sovereignty. I hope China was listening, because that is a clear message to them. Their so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, violates Indian sovereignty. It passes through land illegally occupied by Pakistan. And point number 3 that the Indian side made, SCO reforms. Jaishankar asked member states to include English as a third official language. Now, this may sound benign, but it's also a matter of influence and engagement. Right now, the SCO has 2 official languages, Russian and Mandarin. It reflects the early structure of the SCO. But now it is becoming a much larger Eurasian body. So including English will make matters easier. Jaishankar also touched upon inducting new members. Iran and Belarus are first in line. They're hoping to officially join by the end of this year. So that's what happened at the SCO. A frosty welcome, some veiled attacks, and this family photo. The SCO has 8 members. Must say the Goan sun is looking fantastic. But on a serious note, what do we make of this summit? For any regional group to succeed, you need unity, you need political unity. And that's something that the SCO lacks. When the defense ministers met last month, there was no joint statement. Same story today. China and Russia would like a statement taking on the West, but India wouldn't. India would like a statement on cross-border terror and sovereignty, but China and Pakistan wouldn't. Every member would like a statement on the Ukraine war, but Russia wouldn't. These divisions are holding the SCO hostage. They also raise larger questions about India's engagement with China. On Thursday, Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart. It was a repeat of the defense ministers' meeting last month. India talked about settling the border. China talked about forgetting the border. Beijing wants India to accept the status quo and move on, but New Delhi has refused to do that. What it has not refused is official engagement, which is honestly a contradiction. If terror and talks cannot go hand in hand, how can border violations and talks go hand in hand? Or trade and border violations? It's a question that India must ask itself, because that will determine India's engagement with China-dominated groups like BRICS and SCO. If New Delhi loses interest, the SCO will become anti-Western, a Chinese club with Chinese allies. It will be like paving a highway for China, from China to Central Asia. So engagement must continue, but it must continue on India's terms, not China's. Just asked to go for the coronation of King Charles. He waited 70 years for the throne. I'm sure he can wait another 24 hours. Can't say the same about his realm, though. Charles is not just King of the United Kingdom. He's the head of state in 14 other countries. Let me pull up that map for you. Charles is king in Canada and Australia, in New Zealand and the Bahamas, also in Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. These people did not pick the monarchy. It was forced upon them by British colonialism. We're talking about a different time here. Many young countries were confused about their future after independence, so sticking with the Queen may have seemed logical then. But now things have changed. The so-called realms are not young countries anymore. They are mature democracies. Some of them are rethinking their ties with the crown. They're wondering why they're getting a new king. Indigenous leaders from 12 Commonwealth countries have written to King Charles. They want him to do three things: apologize for colonialism, pay reparations using crown wealth, and return looted artifacts. I don't have a crystal ball, but I can say this for sure: Charles will do none of it. He has talked about acknowledging the mistakes of colonialism, but acknowledgement is one thing, apology is quite another. I know a sorry sounds like too little too late, but sometimes it can go a long way. Just ask UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Last week, he was asked to apologize for British colonialism and the slave trade. He refused. Sunak says focus on the present, not the past. And that comment has been slammed by the Prime Minister of Belize. It's one of the 15 countries where Charles is king. The Prime Minister of Belize says Sunak should have apologized. He also says Belize will, quote-unquote, quite likely remove the monarchy. So 14 realms could soon become 13, 14 apart from the UK. Perhaps even less. Another country, Jamaica, is thinking along the same lines. There are reports of a referendum next year. If the public agrees, Charles will lose Jamaica as well. So it's a gradual process. Queen Elizabeth II lost 17 countries in her reign, like Sri Lanka, Barbados, Kenya, and Pakistan. Her son is on course to losing at least 2. Where does that leave the monarchy? In a precarious situation. But do you know what the irony is? It's the small developing countries that are ditching the crown. The so-called progressive Western countries are not. One reason for that is the process. It's extremely hard to abolish the monarchy. There are a lot of proposals, a lot of votes, a lot of campaigning. Take Canada, for example. If they want to abolish the monarchy, they need unanimous support from the House of Commons, from the Senate, and from all 10 provinces, which is why many experts feel nobody is interested. Same thing with Australia. They have a Republican Prime Minister in Anthony Albanese, but he too will swear loyalty to the king.
I haven't changed my position on that, and I've made that very clear. I want to see an Australian as Australia's head of state. That doesn't mean that you can not have respect for the institution, which is the system of government that we have.
You cannot respect and abolish something. The fact is, not every former colony has the same relationship with the crown. The likes of Australia and Canada may not mind the king, but the likes of Jamaica, Barbados, and Belize do. These are countries that really paid the price for colonialism, with slavery, with engineered famines, and with constant looting. For them, the crown is a painful symbol. So why not dash for the door? If they're scared of risking ties with the UK, just look at India. India is a former colony, but also a republic. Saying no to the crown did not hurt India's ties with the UK. Having said that, some residual doubts remain, like the Commonwealth of Nations. A group of 56 countries, including India, all of them are former colonies of Britain. By default, it is headed by the king or queen. And reports say the new king has a keen interest in India. He's visited 10 times already. His friends say he wants to visit again at the earliest opportunity. To do what exactly? Apparently, Charles loves Indian culture and practices like yoga. We say his interest is certainly welcome, but his royal legacy, not so much. India has long debated the relevance of the Commonwealth. It is not strategic, it is not economically helpful, and it has a burden, the burden of a traumatic past. So why bother holding on to it? Leaving the Commonwealth may not have material gains, but it will bring closure. As for the political fallout, New Delhi should not be worried. The Commonwealth is a relic of the empire, not the UK, the same UK that did not think twice before storming out of the European Union. If that was nationalism, then so is this. Now let's turn our focus to Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in a bind, not over something he did, but over something that he did not. This is about his inaction towards China. There's a storm in Ottawa, new revelations on Chinese activities, how China spied on a Canadian lawmaker, how they sought information about his family. The name of the lawmaker is Michael Chong. He belongs to Canada's opposition party. He has family in Hong Kong, and Beijing wanted to know who they were. Why? It seems to be an intimidation attempt. To understand this, I must tell you about Chong's politics. In 2021, he put forward a motion. This was about Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, about how China was treating them. Chong wanted to declare China's actions a genocide. It is indeed a genocide. China is persecuting these people, these Uyghurs. This is well documented, but China denies it. So when the Canadian lawmaker called it a genocide, China put sanctions on him. Then it wanted to put more pressure, perhaps through Chong's family in Hong Kong, which is why it's being called an intimidation attempt. All this reportedly took place in 2021, 2 years ago. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service knew about it. They even knew that a Chinese diplomat in Canada was involved in the plan. So what did they do about it? Did the Canadian agency inform Chong? Did they take any action against the Chinese diplomat involved? Apparently they did not. And that's why Prime Minister Trudeau is on the back foot. Under his watch, an opposition lawmaker was being threatened by China and he did nothing about it. What explains this? Canada's economic interests, apparently. Taking on China would be a costly affair, sacrificing an opposition leader, perhaps not so much. As you can imagine, Chong did not take this well.
With respect to interests, economic and otherwise, I can't think of an interest more important to the Canadian state than the protection and the safety and the security of its own citizens here on Canadian soil. That trumps all other interests.
I agree with you.
It is inexplicable that this diplomat hasn't been told to leave the country already. And I would hope that the deputy minister is informing the ambassador that this individual, Mr. Wei Zhou, should be on the first plane out or declared persona non grata.
Chinese interference in Canada is not a new story, in fact. And Trudeau has been under pressure to act against it for a while now, especially China's election interference. It is said that China tried to influence the Canadian election in 2019. And now we have this debacle. So Canada is trying to act tough. They've summoned China's ambassador to Canada. His name is Kong Pai Wu. He was told that Canada would not tolerate foreign interference. And then Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs posted this. He said all options are on the table, all options including expelling Chinese diplomats. These are strong words. How did China react? Well, they denied all of this, of course. Listen to this.
The Chinese ambassador to Canada has stated a solemn position to responsible personnel at the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has lodged a strong protest.
China calls the accusations groundless slander. It says its diplomats were engaged only in quote-unquote the normal performance of duties. The Chinese embassy in Canada also put out a statement. After denying the allegations, the statement gets aggressive. Look at the last paragraph. This is what it says. Once again, China strongly urges the Canadian side to immediately stop this self-directed political farce, not to further down the wrong and dangerous path. Should the Canadian side continue to make provocations, China will play along every step of the way until the very end. Play along every step of the way until the very end. Sounds quite combative. So can we expect Canada to expel Chinese diplomats and then China to follow suit? The governments certainly want us to think it's possible, but practically speaking, it may be difficult to decouple, especially in this day and age. What's more likely is this. They'll take tough positions, exchange sanctions, and then try to bury the scandal. Because, like it or not, economic interests usually trump an individual's safety, even if it's a Canadian lawmaker. Our next story is about the US banking crisis. It seems to be spreading. Yesterday, regional banks in America suffered more losses. Their stocks were in the red. They plunged by more than 10%. Investors are pulling out their money. They fear that more banks are on the brink of collapse. Two of them are in the headlines. PacWest and Western Alliance, they're both mid-sized banks. Both are said to be in trouble, and both are exploring their options, including a potential sale. This week began with the sale of First Republic. The bank was in distress. It was sold to JP Morgan. Now it appears that PacWest and Western Alliance could be headed in the same direction. PacWest is in particularly bad shape. Yesterday, its shares dropped by more than 50%, and a 50% drop is a clear red flag. This year has been bad for the bank. In all, it has lost more than 85% of its stock value, which means losses for investors, millions of dollars in losses, and the bleeding is still on. So PacWest is being forced to consider radical moves. The bank issued a statement, I'm quoting from it. Recently, the company has been approached by several potential partners and investors. Discussions are ongoing. The company will continue to evaluate all options to maximize shareholder value. What does this mean? It means that all options are on the table. That's what the bank is saying. It could sell its assets, it could bring in an investor, it could even consider an all-out sale. And these are extreme measures, and they tell you how big the crisis is. In fact, all the banks that are in trouble face the same problem, the problem of liquidity. There's a cash crunch. They don't have money. Where did the money go? Ask the US Central Bank. They call it the Federal Reserve. In recent months, the Fed has hiked interest rates, and that hike has punched a hole in the books of American banks. How did that happen? Well, these banks held many government bonds. With the rate hikes, the value of those bonds has declined. So now the banks are in trouble. And the Fed is still hiking interest rates. Yesterday, it announced another hike, the 10th one since March 2022. You know what this means for American banks? It means more pain. But the Fed chairman is not worried. He claims the US banking system is resilient.
Let me comment briefly on recent developments in the banking sector. Conditions in that sector have broadly improved since early March, and the US banking system is sound and resilient. We will continue to monitor conditions in the sector. We're committed to learning the right lessons from this episode, and will work to prevent events like these from happening again.
The banking system is sound and resilient, he says. If that's the case, then why are banks collapsing? PacWest is exploring options, and Western Alliance is braving a storm. Yesterday, its stock price plunged by 62%. This is after a report came out that said the bank is exploring a potential sale, and that Western Alliance has hired advisors to explore options. The report also said that these deliberations are at an early stage. So the stocks began falling. Western Alliance rushed into damage control mode. It denied the report. It called it, quote-unquote, categorically false. The stock recovered, but only partially, a gain of 32%. The bank also released its deposit numbers. They're holding steady for now, but investors are increasingly wary. There are growing calls for regulatory intervention. Wall Street executives and bank analysts want the Federal Reserve to intervene. They want the central bank to take more steps to ensure more liquidity for the banks. But will that really help? And will that be enough, considering the fact that the Fed's own credibility is being questioned? The Fed chairman made an admission this week, and he said that the bank had made some mistakes.
I fully recognize that we made mistakes. I think we've learned some new things as well, and we need to do better. And as I mentioned, I thought the report was unflinching and appropriately so. I welcome it, and I agree with and will support those recommendations. And I do feel that I'm personally accountable to do what I can to foster measures that will address the problems.
So the Fed made mistakes, and American banks paid the price for it. In the last 2 months, 3 banks have failed: Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, and First Republic Bank. Their combined asset base was nearly $550 billion, which is not a small amount. Yet these banks could not survive. If this list grows, the US Fed will face some tough questions. Could NATO be coming to Asia? From all accounts, yes. The military alliance is opening its first liaison office in Japan. The date has not been revealed, but both Japanese and NATO officials have confirmed this. What will this office do? Reports say the focus will be on cybersecurity and disinformation. It will be a hub for NATO's Pacific partners, namely Australia, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. All 4 countries attended last year's NATO summit. And this is a very controversial move. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Its focus is limited to the Northern Atlantic. At least it was. But Japan is new territory. It is located in the Pacific, which is outside NATO's focus area. So what explains this new office? In one word, China. Last year, NATO designated China as a security challenge. It was a first for them. 1 year later, they're opening an office in Japan. Coincidence? Well, I don't think so. NATO has been gradually pivoting to the Pacific. First came the designation of China, then came the summit where Pacific leaders attended, and now the Japan office. If the idea was to rile up China, then good job, we say. Beijing says NATO is pushing Asia towards a conflict.
NATO's continual eastward expansion in the Asia-Pacific region and its intervention in regional affairs will inevitably destroy regional peace and stability and push for bloc confrontation, which calls for high vigilance from countries in the region.
Destroy regional peace. I would say China is managing that by itself. But how should other countries view this development? Countries like India. There is no denying that NATO has a bloody past. Wherever they go, trouble has followed, like Yugoslavia or Afghanistan. There is also no ambiguity about the NATO's purpose. There is no economic or cultural angle to it. It is pure and simple military power play. So NATO turning eastward should have our attention. It could set off an arms race, or worse. Last month, America's NATO envoy talked about the alliance's Indo-Pacific plans. Here's what she said. Membership is not something that we have really considered with anyone in the Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific. The door is open to the region, but there are no plans to expand this to a broader global military alliance. So no membership plans, at least for the time being. But these things change fast. US allies in the region are eager to cooperate with NATO. Japan is at the forefront. Prime Minister Kishida says East Asia could be tomorrow's Ukraine. He wants to double Japan's military budget, and that could speed up the alliance's Pacific pivot. New Delhi, too, must be ready for this development. In March, NATO held talks with Indian officials behind closed doors. Reports say China was discussed. Such exchanges will be key for New Delhi. Not to think about joining NATO, because that's beyond question, but to understand what the alliance is planning to do, basically to be in the loop. US officials have talked about increasing NATO's cooperation with India. They say the door is open for New Delhi. I hope not like it was for Ukraine. You see, military power is not the answer in Asia, at least not yet. China's economic dominance remains the biggest obstacle for Asian countries. They do not particularly like China, but they cannot give up Chinese money and trade. Tackling that should be the bigger priority. As for the military challenge, there are enough regional powers who must take the lead. India is one of them. You cannot take on China by importing a transatlantic alliance. You need to strengthen existing regional groupings like Quad, like AUKUS, like ASEAN. The question is, does the West have the patience and the maturity to do this? Now let's look at what NATO's big brother, the US, is doing in the other side of the world. After all, Washington has interests all over the planet, and enemies too. One of the biggest rivals is Iran, and Tehran seems to be making some bold moves lately. Last week, Iran released footage of its navy capturing an oil tanker. It was sailing out from Kuwait and apparently bound for the US. Then 2 days ago, the US says a second tanker was captured. Washington says Tehran is up to its old tricks, disrupting the region's oil trade. But it seems the US has a solution now. It wants to line the entire Arabian Peninsula with robots at sea. The US is trying to convince its Gulf allies to add dozens of robot ships around the peninsula. Our next report has the details.
Iran's apparently at it again, disrupting oil flows in the Persian Gulf. Last week, Iran's navy seized an oil tanker near the Gulf nation of Oman. It was called the Vantage Suite. Iran's state media even released this video showing the capture. The tanker was flagged to the Marshall Islands. It's a small island nation in the Pacific Ocean. Why did Iran capture their oil tanker? Reports say it's because of where the tanker was headed. It set sail from Kuwait and was bound for Houston, Texas in the US. Basically, Iran captured an American oil shipment. Then Tehran allegedly did it again this week. This time the US released this footage. It purportedly shows Iran's Revolutionary Guard surrounding an oil tanker. This one is called the Niovi. It's flagged to the Central American nation of Panama. Iran hasn't officially acknowledged this second capture yet. Now the question is, why is Iran stalling US oil deliveries? It's part of the larger US-Iran tensions which have been exacerbated due to recent diplomatic events. Iran's long-standing rivalry with Saudi Arabia is ending. China brokered a deal to normalize ties between the two nations. Then there's the Gulf nations trying to bring Syria back into the Arab fold. Syria's ruling regime is allied with Iran. Basically, tensions between the Arab Gulf nations and Iran are going down. It leaves Iran with more time to focus on other problems, namely the US. And of course, Washington is in a bind. On the one hand, it can't overtly call for West Asian nations to shun Iran. It has to pretend, at least, that it's happy about the tensions receding. No one wants to look like a warmonger, after all. But how can the US isolate Iran if Gulf nations are trying to mend ties? Bring up oil security, of course. Washington wants to surround the Arabian Peninsula with robots at sea. The US Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain. It actually leads international coalitions from the Gulf nation. As part of this alliance, the US has already deployed over 50 robots at sea in the region. These are also called unmanned surface vehicles, or USVs. Basically, naval drones that float on the ocean surface. The US says it's a cheap way to have eyes on Iran's navy at all times. Cheap, of course, is subjective. The robots cost between $800,000 to $3 million. But they might well be within budget for America's oil-rich Gulf allies. It's even incentivizing the robots by removing red tape. They're exempt from America's lengthy foreign military sales process. The Gulf nations can snap these up quick. Despite this, the robots don't have too many takers. So far, only Bahrain and Kuwait have publicly announced plans to buy them. But the US is hopeful. It plans to have more than 100 sea robots patrolling the Persian Gulf by the end of this summer. And Iran's fuel tanker heists will definitely be used as a sales pitch for more robots at sea.
After a long week of toil and trouble, are you looking forward to some much-needed relaxation? Waking up late in the morning, catching up with friends, or binge-watching that Netflix series you've been meaning to? What about exercising, though? Are you looking forward to exercising as well? I know it's almost weekend, and you must be swimming in Friday feels. So you'd rather not discuss exercise right now. The sweat and tears that come with it don't really scream happiness. But hear me out. Even small amounts of exercise can have an outsized effect on your happiness. And why is that? Because of a secret sauce, one that is made up of something called hope molecules. Here's a report. Exercising is different for different people, but for some, it is a haunting New Year resolution, the guilt behind every burger, and the broken promise we constantly try to keep. Our relationship with exercise is just not working out because that itself can be a daunting exercise. Poetics aside, we have some data for you. More than a quarter of the world does not exercise enough, and despite all the resolutions we keep, there's been no improvement in global levels of physical activity since 2001. That being said, remember different countries exercise differently. So some are doing relatively all right. Citizens in the Netherlands are the most active. They spend about 13 hours a week working out, followed by Germany, Romania, Russia, Hungary, and India. Yes, Indians aren't too far behind. They spend about 8 hours a week exercising. But then there are countries like Italy, Japan, and Brazil. And we don't mean to call anyone out, but they spend less than 4 hours a week on exercise. 1 in 3 people in Japan don't exercise at all. It won't be too surprising if a lot of us can relate to that statement. But here's the thing. As tough as the pre-exercise inertia is, beating it is totally worth it. And you don't have to be another Jane Fonda to do so, because exercise in whatever form and for however long makes our lives better. You probably already know that because the physical benefits of movement have been long documented. It lowers blood pressure, reduces the risk of cancer and diabetes. It helps us age in a healthy manner, and the list goes on and on. But the benefits are not just physical, they are emotional as well. As saddening as the thought of working out sounds, exercising makes us happier. It improves our mood and our ability to learn. It even makes us more hopeful. Yes, exercising gives us hope. And science has a clear answer why. We can't see the magic because it happens at a cellular level. When we exercise, our muscles contract. They secrete chemicals into our bloodstream. At the risk of giving you a terrible analogy, think of a wet sponge. When scrunched, it releases water. Now these released chemicals enter our bloodstream and make a nice little journey to our brains. These chemicals are often called hope molecules because they literally act as antidepressants. They make us feel good. But here's the thing. We can preach about the perks of exercising all we want. In reality, when we're feeling low, all we want to do is marinate on our couch and zone out in front of Netflix. But that's exactly what's hurting us. Teenagers who use screens throughout the day are twice as likely to get depressed. People with lower physical activity have lower self-esteem. Moral of the story? Get moving to get happy. And it need not be a high-intensity workout. Even a simple 10-minute walk will help. Exercise, even in small doses, is waiting to be your happy pill. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Taiwan is conducting civilian drills to prepare for a Chinese attack. This is amid rising tensions between the neighbors. In Denmark, slackliners drew in crowds in the capital city of Copenhagen. They walked a 160-meter-long high line strung 15 meters above the ground. In Italy, Naples is exploding with joy. The city has finally won its first Serie A soccer title in over 3 decades. And now, taking you back in history, why is the 5th of May significant? Let's go back to the year 1961. Today, America sent its first astronaut in space. Alan B. Shepard Jr., who was launched 185 kilometers into space. He made a 15-minute suborbital flight. That'll be all for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday.
Applause from the 120 or so people. He's going up with, I believe, Dr. Douglas and another technician, a spacesuit technician. Liftoff. Liftoff at 34 minutes after the hour.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate But does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.